You can go years without eating sweets, cakes, and sugar in tea. That's all. Equals one day hearing sugar on an empty stomach. High, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes. Type. And it's not because you lost your temper, or they didn't try hard, but because you. For a very long time they taught incorrect logic. It's like diabetes starts in the sugar bowl. Diabetes almost never starts there. It starts quieter, deeper in the liver, in muscles, in how the body in general manages the fuel. And this is it. Most people don't understand. Moreover, some, having refused sweets, they begin to make it so that make the situation worse without noticing it. Remember a simple but unpleasant thing. Sweets are not the only and often not main factor. You can remove the sugar, but leave the main reason, and then the disease simply goes around. Is it possible? On the contrary, do not be a fanatic of prohibitions, but restore the body's sensitivity to own insulin, and indicators will begin to change for the better. I'll say it even more harshly. Sometimes a person stops eating sweets, but switches to proper cereals, bread, dried fruits, healthy honey, and understands why sugar still jumps. Because for the organism is more important not whether it is sweet or not sweet to the taste. More important is how quickly and how much food is converted into glucose and how the liver and muscles react. This is especially important in adulthood, because over the years it's natural. Muscle mass decreases and changes. Hormones work, and the liver becomes more inclined to store excess energy. And it turns out to be a typical situation. A person eats little, almost no sweets, and the waist grows, the pressure rises. Tests are getting worse. It's not age-related. Inevitability. This is a pattern of exchange. Substances that can be turned into the other side. For you to watch until end and didn't stop at half-truths. I'll leave the most important point for last. One that many people don't know, and because which people have been going around in circles for years. This moment often decides whether diabetes will progress or begin retreat. Now let's start with first layer, from what actually happens in the body when you just removed the sweets. There is a keyword: insulin. Many of him. They are afraid that it is something bad. Insulin is actually a normal hormone. Life. It helps glucose enter cells. The problem doesn't start then. When insulin exists and when cells, they stop answering it normally. This is called insulin resistance. Door with lock. Insulin is the key. In youth, the lock works easily. Key turned, the door opened, the glucose left into the muscles, into the organs where it is needed. And with age, against the background of excess fat in abdominal area, immobility, and constant snacking, the castle begins. Jam. The key is the same, but the door, it opens worse. The body does. Logical. To open the door he does. More keys, that is, raises insulin. And here is the trap. You removed candy, but if you eat it anyway, that blood sugar regularly rises. Even from bread, potatoes, rice, pasta, sweet yogurts, juices, bananas, dried fruits, the body doesn't care. Yesterday to subside insulin. A high insulin is a signal to store this increased hunger, drowsiness after food. This is waist growth, this is blood pressure, this is fatty liver. There is another mechanism, which is rarely spoken in simple words. The liver can make sugar itself. Yes, even if you don't eat sweets at all. The process is called glucose production. Liver. It is needed so that you do not fall into fainting between meals. But when the liver is overloaded, especially if fat accumulates, it begins release too much glucose into the blood actively, and then the person has sugar. The Motoshchak is tall, although in the evening he is okay. I didn't eat sweets. That is, you can remove sweets from the plate, but if the liver and muscles do not accept glucose, normal, but the liver also adds it above, sugar will still be a problem. That's why in adulthood, the wrong focus on sweets often gives false calm. The person thinks, I don't eat candy, that means I'm in safety. And the body lives according to other mathematics. Microaction is already on. Tomorrow. Very simple, but revealing. One day, watch not for sweets, but then, after what food do you want? Lie down. Konyev's dream is pulling something again. Chew after 1 to 2 hours. It's almost always a sign that glucose got up quickly and walked just as quickly down, and the body requires supplements. Yours. The task is to see the pattern, not scold yourself, see. And one more thing. Observation. If you wake up with heavy head, dry mouth, do you often get up to go to the toilet at night if in the morning? You measure your sugar and it is higher than normal. This is not. I always ate with affection yesterday. Very often. This is the work of the liver and the general background. Insulin resistance. If it is important for you to have such conversations, there were more calm on business and without horror stories. Like and subscribe. This helps promote useful topics to those who really need them. Further, I will continue the same line and show the first practical step, which is, in adulthood, is often more important than any refusal of Slavsky. He directly restores insulin sensitivity and changes numbers in analyzes within 7 days. Continuing the same thought, it is important to understand one thing. If cells do not release glucose inside, no restrictions on sweets will solve the problem completely. Therefore, the first really working step is not in restrictions and in returning tissue sensitivity to insulin. And there is a factor here that in mature age is influenced more by nutrition. Muscles. Muscles are the main consumer. Glucose. Not the brain, nor the liver, namely. Muscles at rest and especially during work. And here lies a quiet but powerful. The reason why after 50 years of age there is a risk. Diabetes increases even among those who eat moderately. With age, muscle mass decreases. This process goes on for everyone, even if the weight almost does not change on the scales. Fat gradually replaces muscle tissue, and fat almost does not use glucose. What is this? Means in practice? Let's say at 35 years old, a person had approximately 30 kilograms of active muscle mass. He ate, the glucose went into muscles. Sugar levels returned to normal. Fast. At the age of 55, the muscles became, say, 23 to 24 kilograms. A person eats the same amount or even less, but receivers for glucose has become significantly smaller. Sugar lasts longer, remains in the blood. Pancreas, forced to secrete more insulin, and cells react to it worse and worse. Circle closes. This is why many tests are getting worse despite refusal. Sweet. The problem is not only that you eat, but where does this energy go? Can go. If she has nowhere to go, she remains in the blood or is deposited in the form of fat, especially in the abdominal area and in the liver. There is a very revealing scientific fact. In studies of people with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, two groups were compared. One group, I just reduced calories and removed sweet. The second added regular muscle activity without fanaticism. Simple power movements, working with own weight, elastic bands, dumbbells. A few weeks later, it was at the second. Insulin sensitivity groups increased. Much stronger, even if the weight did not decrease so noticeably, because it was not the number on the scale that changed, but the quality. Fabrics. It is important to emphasize that this is not about sports, not about the gym, not about records. It's about signal to the body. Muscles are needed. When the muscles get a load, they begin take up glucose even without participation. Insulin. This is the key point. Rarely speak in simple words. During and after muscular work, glucose can enter cells directly. This means less blood sugar and less stress to the pancreas. This is especially valuable in adulthood because it allows you to reduce insulin without tablets, but physiologically. And low insulin is easier to control. Appetite, less swelling, lower blood pressure, better sleep, fewer night awakenings. It's a common mistake to think that enough is enough. Walk more. Walking is beneficial, but it poorly preserves muscle mass. Muscles. You need at least the minimum, but stimulus that resists load. Exactly. It starts recovery. Insulin sensitivity. Microaction for the next 7 days. Simple and doable for almost anyone. Age. Every day 10 to 15 minutes. Elementary power movements. Slowly. Calmly, without jerking. Squat up. Comfortable depth, push-ups from the wall or table, rising from a chair without assistance. Hands exercises with an elastic band. The main thing is not quantity, but regularity. Very important. Don't do this on an empty stomach if you have. There is dizziness or weakness. Light meals and after 30–60 minutes of quiet load. Your goal is not fatigue and a feeling of warm work in muscles. After 7 to 10 days many. Note that after eating there was less pull you to sleep, evening hunger decreases. Morning sugar levels have become more equal. This is not a miracle or the effect of suggestion. This biochemistry. The muscles began to do their job. Work. Another important point. Muscular activity reduces fat in the liver, and this directly affects fasting sugar. When the liver ceases to be an overcrowded warehouse, she begins to behave calmer and stops releasing excess glucose into blood at night and early in the morning. If you connect, what we talked about earlier becomes clear. Giving up sweets without restoration of muscle function is half the solution, sometimes even less. Next, it is logical to talk about what exactly is most often found in nutrition. Prevents muscles and liver from working normal, even if there is sweets in the diet. Almost none. There are several unexpected traps that people fall into. A lot of people are over 50 years old. If you can do everything about fix already said, it becomes clear why many people, after 50 years, there is a feeling of impasse. There are almost no sweets, the portions are moderate, and sugar behaves stubbornly. And here we are. Let's come to the next very important thing. Layer to those products and combinations, which are formally considered correct, but they work at the metabolic level, against liver and sensitivity to insulin. The main trap is fast carbohydrates without sweet taste. The body is not, reads labels and does not respond to your beliefs. He only reacts to the rate of glucose entering the blood. White bread, instant porridge, mashed potatoes, rice, pasta, corn flakes, bread, gallops. Oh, it turns into glucose very quickly, sometimes faster than regular sugar. Many people are surprised when I say, a plate of oatmeal on the water can raise the sugar more than a piece of cake. Not because the cake is healthy, but because that in porridge glucose is almost available instantly, especially if the porridge is boiled until soft and eaten separately. For the body is a sharp signal. Energy. A lot, and insulin immediately shoots up, and after, sugar drops for a short time, causing hunger, weakness, and desire for something again. In adulthood, this pattern especially dangerous because the pancreas is no longer as flexible as in 30 years old, and the muscles and liver we are talking about. They said they don't have time to recycle this stream. As a result, a person can eat 3 times a day porridge and vegetables and at the same time constantly walk with elevated insulin. There is one more thing that is rarely directly associated with diabetes, but it plays a huge role. These are frequent snacks: yogurt, apple, banana, handful, dried fruits, cookies for tea, sandwich. It all looks harmless, but everyone. A snack is a new release of insulin. Insulin doesn't like fuss. When he is constantly elevated, cells stop him to react even faster to the body. We need periods when insulin is low. It is at these moments that the liver unloads, fat begins, used as energy. Cell sensitivity is being restored. If a person eats every 2 to 3 hours, even little by little, there is almost no insulin. Falls. It's like constantly holding foot on the gas pedal. The motor is wearing out. It is necessary to say something about fruits. They useful, but not in any quantity and not in any time. Fructose contained in fruits, processed in the liver. If the liver is already overloaded, excess fructose accelerates the accumulation of fat in it, and then sugar on an empty stomach suffers again. Especially juices and smoothies are insidious. There's fructose. Arrives quickly and in concentrated form. Without chewing and without inhibiting factors. A very common situation. Human doesn't eat sweets, but drinks juices and eats a lot. Fruit for vitamins, snacks. Dried fruits, and doesn't understand why. Tests are not improving. From the point of view biochemistry, everything is logical. The liver gets constant flow of raw materials to be converted into glucose and fat. Now important practical conclusion. For mature age, it is much more important not so much what to remove, how much to combine. Protein and fiber slow down glucose absorption. When carbohydrates go along with protein and fats, sugar rises more slowly, insulin stands out more calmly, and saturation lasts longer. A simple example. Same porridge, but not on an empty stomach and not separately, and together with eggs, fish, cottage cheese, sugar-free yogurt, and the reaction. The body will be completely different. Potatoes not in the form of mashed potatoes, but in dense form with vegetables and protein. This is no longer glucose shock, but a smoother signal. Microaction for the next 7 days. Eliminate chaotic snacking and make 2 to 3 meals a day and leave. There is a pause of at least 4 hours between them, if state of health allows. In every, be sure to add food to your meal. Source of protein. Do not increase portions. Just change the structure. Very often. This is already enough for the morning. Sugar has dropped. Please also pay attention to speech. Late carbs, even. Correct, I often worsen my performance on an empty stomach because the liver is more active at night. Releases glucose. Light protein. Dinner with vegetables is usually better tolerated. If you combine this with what we're talking about, talked before, with muscle activity, and understanding the role of insulin, you begin. See the system, not individual prohibitions. Diabetes is not about willpower, it's about physiology that can be respected and use it to your advantage. If these explanations help you understand better your body and accept calmer, conscious decisions, support this video. Like and subscribe. This allows talk about health honestly and vastness. We'll go further. Let's take a deeper look at the factor that often completely devalues both nutrition and physical activity if ignore. It is directly related to hormones, and it is after 50 years that it begins play a decisive role. If you carefully combine everything that has already been discussed, it becomes obvious. Feeding and movement can be lined up correctly, and the results will still be there. Unstable. Sugar goes down and then back up. Growing. In the morning, the indicators are worse than in the afternoon. There is a feeling that the body is alive with your life. And at this moment almost one factor is always underestimated. Who after 50 years starts directly manage metabolism. This is a dream and associated hormonal levels. Dream. This is not a vacation in the everyday sense, it is active hormonal work. Exactly. At night the body decides how it will be manage glucose for the next day. And if sleep is disturbed, all previous efforts begin to work at half strength. A very clear physiology. If there is a shortage, cortisol levels increase during sleep. Stress hormone. Cortisol is needed, it is. Helps to survive, but he has side effect. He levels up blood glucose. He literally gives the liver commands to throw out sugar, even unless there is a real need for it. It's an ancient fight-or-flight mechanism. The problem is that with chronic, if you don't get enough sleep, this mode is always on. In adulthood, the situation gets worse. Sleep becomes more superficial. More often, there are night awakenings, early rises. Many people wake up at 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning with a feeling of anxiety or just clear-headed and unable to sleep. From the point of view of endocrinology, this is often coincides with the nocturnal release of cortisol and glucose. That is why such people, sugar on the stomach is higher than after food during the day. It is very important to understand that this is not nerves and not age. This is a glitch in the rhythms. And if you don't take it into account, you can endlessly change diet and exercise without receiving stable result. There's another one. Hormone that is directly affected by poor sleep, leptin. He is responsible for Feeling of satiety. When a person sleeps little or bad, leptin decreases, and the other hormone, ghrelin, responsible for appetite, growing. As a result, the next day, I want to eat more, especially fast food. Carbohydrates. Not because there is no willpower, but because biology pushes precisely in this side. Hence the typical picture. In the evening a person holds on, eats right, and the next day he breaks into bread, porridge, fruit, snacks, and grows again. Insulin. The liver is congested again. Now about meal times and sleep. Late heavy dinners, especially with carbohydrates, impair night regulation. Sahara. The body must rest at night, rather than processing glucose. When food arrives late, insulin remains elevated, and then against its background there is a sudden surge at night. Glucose. The person doesn't feel it, but in the morning he sees the numbers. Practical conclusion. Very specific here. For mature age, sleep is just as therapeutic factor like nutrition and movement, and it should not be treated as something secondary, but as part of therapy. Microaction for the next 7 days. Record a stable departure time. Sleep. Not when it works out, but the same thing. Time plus or minus 30 minutes. Even if at first does not fall asleep quickly, the body will begin to adjust. Second, last. Eating 3 to 4 hours before bedtime. Not starve, but also don't overload. Protein. Vegetables, some fat. This is usually the most a calm option for night regulation. Sahara. Third, light. Bright light. In the evening, especially screen time, reduces melatonin production. And melatonin is not only a sleep hormone, it also affects insulin sensitivity. With him, deficiency, carbohydrate metabolism disorder. Higher. Dim light in the evening is simple, but an underrated measure. And one more important one. A moment that is rarely talked about. Alcohol even slightly worsens sleep. Night regulation of sugar. He can create a feeling of relaxation, but phase. Dreams become superficial. Cortisol increases at night, and morning values often get worse. If you combine this with previous steps, you begin to see the whole picture. Muscles help. Utilize glucose. Power structure. Reduces insulin spikes. Sleep and rhythms are not allowing hormones to destroy this work. But there is another layer, without which even good sleep doesn't always help. This latent inflammation and liver condition, which we have already talked about. Exactly. There is often the last break, preventing sugar from returning to normal. And about this needs to be discussed separately and calmly. If we continue this logical line without breaks, we are getting to a place where many people have misunderstanding. It seems that sleep has been established, and eating became calmer, and movement appeared, but the indicators are still the same. Get stuck. Not a disaster, but not either norm. And here almost always there is a factor that few people talk about, thinks as the cause of diabetes, chronic latent inflammation and liver condition. It is important to say right away, it's not about inflammation that hurts, not about temperature and not about cold states. We are talking about a slow background inflammatory, a process that may not last for years, felt, but constantly interferes with insulin work. This is the condition that is often becomes the background against which diabetes develops even in disciplined people. Let's start with the liver, because it central node of URL exchange. The liver decides how much glucose to keep in the blood, how much to give to the muscles, and how much to produce yourself. And if the liver healthy, she does it for sure. But if in liver accumulates fat, its behavior is changing. Fatty liver is not. Alcohol is required and not required. Obesity. Very often it is formed in people with normal or slightly elevated weight, especially after 45 and 50 years. Reason: years of excess insulin, frequent ptericus, excess of fast carbohydrates and fructose. Liver fat makes her deaf to insulin signals, and the liver begins to eject glucose even when it is in the blood, and that's enough. Hence the typical situation. Sugar during the day more or less normal, but higher in the morning. Human, perplexed, begins to get even tougher. Limit food, and the liver reacts. An even greater release of glucose, because perceives the situation as a threat. About inflammation. Adipose tissue, especially in the abdominal area, is not just a reserve energy. It is an active endocrine organ. It releases substances that support the inflammatory background. These substances directly worsen cell sensitivity to insulin. It turns out to be a vicious circle. Insulin high, fat accumulates, inflammation increases, insulin works even worse. In adulthood, this process accelerates because the level decreases. Protective hormones slows down. Tissue restoration work deteriorates. Mitochondria energy stations. Cells. As a result, even small errors in lifestyle give more pronounced metabolic response than in youth. There is an important scientific point, which is worth remembering. Insulin resistance. It's not just a reaction to food. This cell defense mechanism on background overload and inflammation. It's like a cage. Says, I have too much already, I don't take it anymore. And until it goes down. Inflammatory background, persuasion in the form of diets. They work poorly. Practical conclusion here. Not to look for wonder bugs, but to creating conditions under which inflammation begins to decline naturally. And such. There are conditions. First, regular periods. Low insulin. We have already talked about them when discussing snacks. It is during these periods the liver begins to use up its reserves, and inflammatory signals are decreasing. Second, sufficient protein intake. BIAC is not only saturates, but also reduces inflammation. Background supports muscle mass and improves insulin sensitivity. Third, omega-3 fatty acids. They participate in the regulation of inflammation. Cellular level. Fatty fish. 2 or 3 times a week is not fashion, but biochemical support for the liver and vessels. The fourth movement, about which we have already said this, but with an important clarification. It should be regular, not episodic. Rare but intense exercise can increase inflammation and calm. Constant activity, on the contrary, it reduces microaction for the next 7 days. Remove everything that supports background inflammation with no real benefit. Frequent snacks, sugary drinks, juices, alcohol. Add a little bit to your diet. Fish, vegetables, greens, enough. Amount of water. This is not a cure, but it is creating conditions under which the body begins to repair himself. When the liver is gradually unloading many with, they are surprised to notice that sugar begins to decline without tightening diets. This is a good sign. He talks about that you have stopped fighting symptoms and began to influence the cause. But there is one more point, the most subtle and most underrated. It is he who often decides why some people have indicators improve while others freeze. Despite all efforts, this moment is not, lies on the surface and is rarely discussed open. It's worth talking about. Further, moving further along this chain, we come to the factor which often completely devalues everything: correct actions. If it's not, keep in mind that it does not lie on the surface, is not reflected directly in the analyses, and almost never discussed at receptions in detail. This is chronic stress and how the nervous system controls metabolism. Substances after 50 years. It's important here right away. Expand the accents. It's not about experiences in the everyday sense and not about weaknesses of character. It's about physiological state of the nervous system that can be in place for years. On high alert, organism in this mode lives as if there is danger nearby, even if outwardly everything is calm. For glucose, this has direct consequences. When the nervous system is in chronic tension, blood regularly releases cortisol and adrenaline. Their task is to provide body with fast energy, and fast energy is glucose. The liver gets signal, needs fuel, and starts release sugar into the blood, not because that you ate poorly, but because your body lives in alarm mode. And here, a paradoxical situation arises. A person can eat in moderation, correctly, keep intervals, move, sleep, more or less stable, but internal voltage maintains high background glucose and insulin. This is especially noticeable in the morning and in emotional situations. Loads. After 50 years, the nervous system becomes less flexible. Recovery. After stress, it goes slower. What's in 35 years have flown by and been forgotten. At 55, maybe. Maintain hormonal levels for weeks. Response. And if this is not taken into account, the exchange substances constantly work against person. There is one more important point. Chronic stress increases inflammation, which we talked about earlier. This, confirmed by many studies. Cortisone in the short term suppresses inflammation, but in chronic increasing it makes the tissue less insulin sensitive and disrupts regulation of the immune system. In the end, the inflammatory background becomes sustainable. Very often people don't associate their condition with exchange substances. They say, I'm just like that. I'm a character. I'm used to keeping everything under control. Control. But for the body, that's all. Equals stress, and he pays for it. Glucose in the blood. Now important. Practical conclusion. In adulthood, working with the nervous system is not psychology for psychology's sake. This metabolic necessity. Without her, sugar stabilization is often impossible. For a long time, microaction for the next 7 days should be very simple and not require effort. Find every day 10 to 15 minutes for the condition in which the nervous system receives a signal. Security. It could be calm. Walk without phone, slow breathing, with an extended exhalation, warm shower. Silence. As an exercise, but as physiological pause. There is a simple landmark. If during this state, breathing becomes deeper, shoulders drop, jaw relaxes, you are doing everything right. At this moment, parasympathetic nervous system is activated. System, namely it improves insulin sensitivity, reduces cortisol levels and helps the liver stop throwing away excess glucose. Separately, it is worth mentioning the constant flow of information. News, conflicts, disputes, anxious conversations, all this for brain danger signal. In adulthood, age should treat it the same way. Pay attention to your diet. This is not leaving from reality, but concern about physiology. If you connect this layer with the previous ones, with movement, nutrition, sleep, reduction, inflammation, the system begins to work. Agreed upon. The body stops living in constant defense mode and begins restore. And now we come to the final moment, to the very key about which I said at the very beginning. This is not a separate product and not a new ban. This principle, without which all previous the steps remain scattered. He's the one determines whether diabetes will occur, progress or begin to recede. Now you can safely collect everything. About what? Was there a conversation? Into one holistic principle. Without his nutrition remains a diet, movement, exercises, sleep recommendations, and stress is something unnecessary. With him, it all starts to work as one system. And it is this principle that is most often. They don't know everything or underestimate everything. Type 2 diabetes is not a disease. Sugar is a disease of loss of flexibility. Metabolism. While the body is flexible, it knows how to switch, use glucose, then fat, then glucose again. He reacts calmly to food and pauses. Between meals, during exercise, during rest. With age this flexibility is lost, and it is its restoration, and it is not strict prohibitions that determine the outcome. When a person simply removes sweets, he acts linearly. But metabolism, the system is non-linear. She reacts to rhythms, repetition, signals, security or threat. And if these signals are contradictory, the body chooses. The most conservative way is to stockpile and retain glucose in the blood. Remember, everything we've figured out. Muscles are main glucose receiver. Without them, sugar nowhere to go. Nutrition is not a list, prohibitions, but speed and combination. Determining insulin peaks. Sleep is hormonal conductor who decides what will the sugar be like in the morning. The liver is the central regulator that suffers from overload and inflammation. Nervous. The system is an alarm button capable of raise glucose without any food. If at least one of these elements drops out, the system loses consistency. If they all line up in one direction, the body begins restore insulin sensitivity. Slow but steady. This is the one. A point that many people don't know. Normalizing sugar is not a struggle, but restoration of dialogue with the body. When you are constantly at war with food, with appetite, with weight, with tests, body perceives it as stress. And the stress, as we already understood, it increases glucose. When do you create repetitive safety conditions, regular movement, understandable meals, pauses, sleep, reduction of information noise, body sugar begins to release. There are an indicative glue fact in people, which build precisely rhythms and not strict restrictions, indicators. Glycated hemoglobin levels decrease, even without drastic weight loss, because it's not the number on the scale that improves, but energy management. In adulthood, this is especially important. The body no longer. Experiments and extremes are needed. To him, we need predictability. Same bedtime, clear techniques. Food. Regular but gentle exercise. There are no repeated danger signals. It is under these conditions that the pancreas begins to work more calmly. Liver reduces nighttime glucose release. Muscles are more willing to take sugar, and insulin ceases to be constantly high. A practical guideline that can be take with you if you want to understand. Are you moving in the right direction? Look not only at tests. Pay attention to the sensations. Does it become easier to wake up less? Whether you crave food between meals. Is the energy equal during the day? Is the reaction to stress calmer? The first signs of restoration of flexibility. Analyses usually follow suit. And one last important point. Type 2 diabetes is a process which is formed over the years, and it also may take years to reverse. Aside, not in a week or more. Magic, but consistently and sustainable. Age is not the enemy here. Age is experience that allows. Act not impulsively, but accurately. If this conversation was useful to you and helped me see the situation more broadly, please support, like it, and subscribe. It helps to reach such calm, honest topics to those who really need them. Take care not only of indicators, but also rhythms of your life. It is in them most often. It's all about health.